Lena Davis stepped through the glass doors of a modest yet familiar bank, one of the many branches of Davis Financial, the institution she had painstakingly built from the ground up. The late afternoon sun bathed the polished marble floors in golden light, stretching long, elegant shadows across the lobby. As the automatic doors slid open with a soft whoosh, the quiet click of her sneakers against the gleaming tiles echoed gently. Adjusting her casual cardigan over her shoulders, she took a steady breath. She wasn't here for anything major. No critical meetings, no high-stakes negotiations, just a simple withdrawal from her personal account, an errand as ordinary as picking up groceries. Yet this wasn't just any bank. This was Davis Financial, the company she had poured her heart and soul into, the institution she had built on the principles of fairness, accessibility, and unwavering commitment to its customers. Every milestone, every struggle, every triumph had shaped this bank into what it was today. She had personally overseen this very branch's location, approved its construction, and stood at its ribbon-cutting ceremony, proudly celebrating another step forward. But today she wasn't here as the founder or the CEO. She wasn't dressed in a power suit, wearing designer heels, or carrying the weight of leadership on her shoulders. She was here simply as a customer, in sneakers and a cardigan, blending into the background like any other person handling their daily banking needs. No pretense, no special treatment, just business as usual. Or so she thought. As she approached the counter, her demeanor was calm, neutral. But something shifted the moment she stepped up. The young teller behind the counter, a woman named Sophie Matthews, barely glanced at her. No greeting, no friendly acknowledgement. Just a quick flick of her eyes before returning her focus to the computer screen. Lena cleared her throat softly. "Hi, I'd like to make a withdrawal," she said, her voice steady, polite. Sophie still didn't look up. Instead, she wordlessly slid a clipboard across the counter. "Fill this out," she muttered, her tone flat, dismissive. Lena hesitated for a fraction of a second before picking up the pen. The form was standard. Name, account number, withdrawal amount. She wrote down $5,000, not an enormous sum, but enough to require identification. As she slid the form back across the counter, she noticed it, the sudden shift in Sophie's expression. Sophie's eyes darted from the form to Lena's ID, then back to the screen. A flicker of hesitation. Pause just a little too long. The atmosphere changed, something subtle but unmistakable. Then Sophie spoke again, her voice suddenly uncertain. Can you hold on a second?" she asked, gripping Lena's ID tighter than necessary. Before Lena could respond, Sophie disappeared through a frosted glass door into the back office. Lena exhaled slowly, her fingers tapping lightly against the cool marble counter. This wasn't what she had expected. A simple transaction should have been, well, simple. Instead, there was an unspoken tension in the air, a hesitation that didn't sit right with her. Minutes passed. Then Sophie returned, but she wasn't alone. Brad Sullivan, the branch manager, walked out beside her, his posture rigid, his expression carefully neutral. "Good afternoon, Miss Davis," he said, forcing a polite but stiff smile. He gave her a once-over before his gaze landed on the withdrawal slip in his hand. "I understand you're requesting to withdraw $5,000, he continued. Lena nodded, keeping her expression composed. "That's right. From my personal account." Brad hesitated. "Would you mind if I take another look at your ID?" Lena's brow furrowed slightly. "I already gave it to Sophie," she replied, her voice measured but firm. Brad ignored the remark and lifted the ID toward the light, scrutinizing it as if expecting to find something amiss. The longer he examined it, the clearer it became. This wasn't about routine protocol. Then came the question that made her jaw tighten. "What do you do for work, Miss Davis?" Lena inhaled slowly, willing herself to stay calm. Was he serious? "I run a bank," she said evenly, watching his reaction. Brad barely acknowledged her answer. Instead, he turned to Sophie, exchanging a glance before asking another unnecessary question. "Is this a personal account or a business one?" Lena's patience was thinning. It's right there on the form she wanted to snap. Instead, she took a controlled breath. It's a personal account, she reiterated, her voice laced with an edge. Brad flipped her ID over in his hands, pretending to analyze the details, as if expecting something. Anything to justify his reluctance. The lobby, once filled with a low hum of quiet conversations and transactions, felt eerily silent. The air was thick, heavy with an unspoken tension. Sophie stood beside him, her eyes flicking back and forth between Lena and Brad. She wasn't speaking, but her body language screamed discomfort. She knows this isn't right, Lena thought. And then, Brad asked the question that sealed the truth of what was happening. Just to clarify, this is your first time banking with us? His voice was smooth, calculated. Lena's stomach twisted. First time. She had founded this bank. She had chosen this location. She had literally cut the ribbon at its grand opening. Her voice was steady, but her words carried undeniable weight. I have banked here since the day this branch opened, she said, her eyes locking onto his. Brad didn't respond immediately. He seemed to be assessing her, deliberating his next move. And you said you're withdrawing $5,000. His tone suggested the number was somehow unreasonable, despite it being a routine request. Lena clenched her jaw. Yes. Brad's next words were almost condescending. And what kind of bank do you run, Miss Davis? Lena's grip on the counter tightened. Enough was enough. She straightened her posture, squared her shoulders, and met his gaze head-on. I own this bank, she said, her voice unwavering. I founded Davis Financial. Silence. The weight of her words settled between them. For the first time, Brad seemed to actually hear her. His expression flickered. Was it doubt? Embarrassment? But Lena wasn't here for his validation. She had already proven herself, long before this moment. The question was, why did she still have to? Brad looked up at Lena, his gaze unreadable, a pause stretching between them as if he were calculating his next move. The tension in the air was almost suffocating, pressing down like an invisible weight. But Lena didn't flinch. She stood firm, arms crossed loosely over her chest, her expression calm yet unyielding. She had dealt with plenty of challenges in her career. Negotiations, high-stakes decisions, people underestimating her. But this was different. This wasn't a corporate deal or a business dispute. This was her own money, her own bank. And she wasn't going to be made to feel like she was asking for something she didn't deserve. So, you're withdrawing $5,000 from your personal account. Brad repeated, his tone slow, deliberate, as if trying to read her face, waiting for some telltale sign of dishonesty. His eyes searched hers, probing for weakness, waiting for hesitation. Lena held his gaze without wavering. Yes, she said, her voice steady. You've seen the form. You have my ID. Everything checks out. So tell me, Brad, what's the issue? He didn't answer right away. Instead, he flipped the form over in his hands, scanning it as though he expected to find some glaring inconsistency. But there was nothing. No errors, no missing information, nothing that justified this drawn-out process. This wasn't about policy. This wasn't about security. This was about her. Lena could feel her patience thinning, but she refused to let it show. She wouldn't give him the satisfaction of seeing her frustrated. Instead, she waited, watching, letting the silence stretch between them until he was forced to speak. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Brad's expression shifted slightly. He exhaled, straightened his shoulders, and said, I'm going to need you to verify some additional information before we can proceed with this withdrawal. Lena blinked, momentarily caught off guard. Additional information, she repeated. I've already provided everything. My ID, the form, my account number. What more do you need? Brad hesitated for just a second before dropping the question that sent a spark of anger through her veins.